History is such a trivial notion if you stop to think about it. Today is simply yesterday's tomorrow, and yet we tend to advocate to separate the two constructs in entirety. Past history relegated to some level of lack of familiarness, a time disconnected from yourself. Sites you don't recognize, names you can't associate with, and the present, with sites you see every single day and don't even think about it, and people that you're very much familiar with. In truth, though, history is always in the making. There's no way to know exactly what will change with each passing day. For every day that passes, how much does the landscape change in the big picture? How many inches of soil erode from a cliff a day before you can cite the difference of there is a road versus there was a road? We tend to break things up to easily categorize things, history included. And this year we saw an end of an era on the Arcade and Attica Railroad. I felt compelled to revamp my history videos with new information and better format, so my previous 4 videos regarding the cabs have now been unlisted, and unless you have a direct link, you won't be able to go and watch them. This one video should serve as a newer and hopefully better history lesson of the Centercabs to whoever is interested. Times will be shown for each diesel below, so if you want to skip ahead to go to any particular diesel, you can. But first and foremost, we will cover some basic information on the railroad. The Arcade and Attica of today is born out of the ashes of the failed Buffalo, Attica, and Arcade Railroad. In its current form, it originated in 1917 and connected the towns of Arcade and Attica with several town stations along the route. In 1959, the railroad ceased connection with Attica due to frequent washouts, stopping instead at North Java, the location of the largest but not only customer on the line, Reisdorf Brothers Feed Mill. Also located there today is Buffalo Molasses. In 1962, the railroad began offering tourist trains as round trips to one of the old town stations, the Courier's Depot. This trip was typically pulled by one of 2 steam locomotives the railroad bought in 1962, number 18, or number 14, which was bought in 1963, and the railroad experienced a huge boom in popularity because of it. Whenever the steam engines needed maintenance, though, and they do, the diesels of the A&A would fill in. Considered mundane and fairly trivial in the 60s when these excursions began, these diesels have now become vintage themselves, their antiquity striking a curiosity in some as much as steam does for most. The tourist boom wasn't the first break in popularity for the railroad. In 1941, the short line made a gamble and purchased a brand new diesel-electric 44-tonner from General Electric, selling off all but one of their steamers shortly thereafter. Painted in the GE factory bars scheme, orange and black were chosen as those were the colors of the arcade school. Being new tech, it revolutionized how much could be done with little maintenance or warm-up compared to the steam engines of the A&A. Supposedly, 2 brothers even quit just based on the premise that the A&A were switching over to diesel. General Electric ran ads touting the usefulness of the engine, and Arcade made out to be the ideal short line for such. Now, number 110 is one of the first 13 44-tonners ever built, and it is what is designated typically as a Phase 1B, meaning the ladders overlap on the trucks on each side, only behind where the doors are, as opposed to the later styles, which would have 4 ladders at each end. This early version also had a cowcatcher-style pilot, which was covered with sheet metal to help with snow drifts on the short line. The shop crew did add a third ladder to 110 to help with switching jobs later on. The hoods also feature small door vents and no top venting, which would be changed with the later redesign such as seen with number 111. Now, in my old video, I had stated that there was no video footage of 110 despite its long tenure in service. However, since my last video, a YouTube user FMNut has posted a video of General Electric Centercabs in the East, and this actually features some video of Arcade and Attica 110. This video is linked down below in the comments. It appears to have been made in the early 1960s, as by 1967 the number 110 unit along with number 111 had been repainted into what I, as well as others, have dubbed the crew cut scheme, also known as the simple scheme, where the cab was solid black and the hoods lacked stripes. This was done to, quote, cut the crew time while touching up paintwork, hence the nickname. Between the active switching routines of freight and simultaneously handling tourist excursions, it was certainly a busy time period. As you can take note, by the time the video footage had been taken, the bottom skirt was painted black, almost as if a nod to the paint change that would come in the years that followed. In truth, though, it's theorized that this was replaced or repainted by GE themselves, as in 1947 the ANA would suffer a major derailment due to a spring thaw causing broke rail, and 110 found itself down an embankment requiring an overhaul. It was already in a one-off paint job that we aren't entirely sure how long it wore, as that's the only photographic proof of it, and this has been dubbed the swoop due to the unique styling of the black top of the hoods. However, when it got back from overhaul, most photos, if not all of them, show the skirt being black. So it is theorized that GE just replaced it with a black skirt instead of the orange, and back into service it went. It is unclear exactly when, but number 110 and 111 received Nathan M5 horns fairly early on to their life, and we're not entirely sure when they were put on, but these same horns would go on to be used on the other Centercabs. Now, transitioning into new standards of safety, the FRA requested that the handrails of the diesels were painted distinct colors other than just black. This led to the grabs being painted both yellow and orange over the years, and also led to the practice of white being applied. Number 110 was withdrawn from regular service around 1984 and sat as a parts unit for several years until it was cosmetically restored and put on display behind the M&T Bank in downtown Arcade for everyone to appreciate. Number 110 was used nearly every day in the early days, hauling passengers and freight between Arcade and Attica, and anywhere in between. There's a lot of working history in that old cab, surely. On to the second cab, we have number 111. 111 was purchased in 1947 to replace number 110 while it was away for overhaul after its wreck. Steamer number 6 held down the gap in time between 110 was off the line and the delivery of 111, which wasn't terribly long because it was already built and ready to go. And with the arrival of 111, number 6 was then sold off and scrapped. This new diesel was the culmination of the growing pains and learning of General Electric getting feedback from their earlier designs. Gone were the small exhaust doors, and now large vents were placed on the hood fronts for optimal cooling, 4 ladders at each corner rather than just 2 located behind the doors. And although it did still come with the early cowcatcher style pilot, the handrails also originally connected to the front of the hood, whereas at some point in its lifetime it was replaced with one which wraps around the front hood to make getting from one side of the diesel to the other easier when you're switching. Interestingly, though 110's has been removed while still on display, number 111's vintage plow, the cowcatcher, still remains hidden under the sheet metal plow to this day. 111 is what most people think of when you say 44-tonner. It's the same type as most models and most media that gets covered is of this style of 44-tonner. In 2023, Rapido, the model company, even announced that they were doing 44-tonners and got enough feedback that they would in fact have an exclusive Hobby Time distributor run of Arcade and Attica number 111. So we're getting a little bit of model representation in the modern age. These were open for pre-orders into October, and the pre-order is now closed. So I do not know how many are going to be available on the free market, but it did actually get a model release. Number 111, as mentioned, arrived in the same scheme as number 110, with the bars and painted orange and black, and was repainted into the, quote, crew cut scheme in 1967 alongside number 110. In addition to a doubleheader with number 110, 111 has been ran several times with number 18 in doubleheader, charter, and events. and even saved number 14 when a component failed mid-excursion. That video was captured by Marty Peters in the 80s. I would argue that number 111 is Arcade's most iconic center cab due to the continuation of use into the modern era and the fact that it handled a lot of the freight and a lot of all the media attention that the A&A received when they went through their whole Cremora boxcars thing in the late 60s. Well, 1984 saw 110 withdrawn and turned into a parts loco, 111 hammered on, not only going through the same varieties of handrail paint as 110. 111 also had pilot replacements, even being a segment from a rail car for a time. In 2002, it was repainted alongside number 112, which we'll touch on next, into GE bars once more, though I call it classic arcade moving forward. Throughout the 2000s, 111 would serve on both freight and passenger runs before being withdrawn around 2014, where the railroad purchased their fourth cab, 113. However, many were pleased to see that in 2017 the railroad actually gave 111 a quick overhaul and a fresh coat of paint, along with a new archway logo, in time for it to run a triple header, utilizing the two other center cabs of the Arcade in Attica for the 100-year celebrations. After a few runs that Christmas season, hauling the shorter three-car trains, it was withdrawn again and set onto 14's track in front of the shop, and has pretty much been there ever since. With the completion of the shed extension, it's now been tucked away, barely viewable and accessible, still outside. I'm unsure if the plan is to move it inside or if there is enough room to do it, considering that 18 has to be above ash pit, a maintenance pit, one of those pits. And obviously to constantly move around 111 would be an unnecessary pain. Still, it would be nice to hope that 111 would get to stay inside and not have weather degraded any further. But we'll have to see what the future holds for number 111, as many, many years of service have made it a very tired and underpowered by comparison option to run on the railroad. It is, in fact, the last 44-tonner that the Arcade in Attica had. 1988 would see a change for the railroad, as the first foreign power would be purchased, a 65-ton center cab shipped on a flat all the way from either the Nixon or Martin Drake power plant in Colorado Springs, Colorado. The last two cabs were bought direct from GE, and this was their first second-hand acquisition. It arrived in almost a dandelion yellow, sporting red stripes down the hoods. Sunflower became the go-to nickname for this scheme, at least that's what I call it. On the hoods read City of Colorado Springs, which was eventually painted over and replaced with a big Arcade and Attica on each side respectively. Being a 65-tonner, it looks similar to 111, however the frame is slightly longer and it has more weight, more power under the hoods. A carryover from the power plant in Colorado, the engine has a flasher beacon on the roof, and the A&A has never used it that I'm aware of. It also has the sunshades on the sides and the extra marker lights or coupler spotlights on the front of the hoods. The pilots arrived with hazard stripes in white, however would get repainted into red over the years. As I'm aware, number 110's Nathan Horn was transferred to 112, as number 110 was the retired locomotive. Now, not being bought directly, we can also dive a little more into the history of number 112. It was built for the Navy in 1945, meaning it's actually older than 111, but nowhere is worked over. Originally stationed in Bangor, Washington, it was sent to Crab Orchard Wildlife Refuge with the number 122 as a Department of Interior. And I have recently seen a slide posted publicly showing it in this scheme before being sold to the City of Colorado Springs in 1977. CSUX, I believe, is the reporting mark that it is usually designated under, and it was renumbered to number 9701. 3 paint schemes have been seen under the power plant lifespan, the third of which was the delivered livery. By 2002, the railroad wanted to spruce things up and get some new riders, so number 112 and 111 were repainted into the classic arcade livery, which is what it still wears today. The Nathan M5 horn was moved from the front hood in front of the windows to the roof sometime after the 2002 repaint, but it did stay on the hoods for a while. In 1988, it left shoving coal hoppers in Colorado for hauling covered hoppers and tanks in New York until 2023, when it was effectively retired from freight to being relegated to the Christmas season excursion trains. By 2012, it was apparent that the railroad was in need of more power. The two in-service Centercabs, number 112 and 111, handled freight just fine, but 111 was limited to only a few loads, and number 112 was already starting to show its age, a reminder that it was in fact older than 111. The increasing size of rail cars and upping of weight was a big growing pain for the rails of the A&A and also its active roster. In 2014, the railroad acquired its fourth and final to date Centercab. It is a re-weighted, narrow hood GE design, now designated as an 80 ton. It was originally either a 50 or a 65 tonner, depending on who you talk to. Through modification, it's been upgraded to an 80 tonner. It was sourced from a consolidated Edison power plant on Staten Island, and it was the main mode of power for both the freight and passenger trains from 2014 to 2023. Up until this last year, it was frequent to find number 113 and 112 doubleheading an 8 or 9 car freight train up to North Java and bringing the empties back at least 3 times a week. What used to be a run or 1 or 2 hoppers, as seen in vintage footage, was now consolidated into larger runs. Reisdorf required more material. The engine arrived back in 2014 in a very plain but bright industrial yellow, and in addition to having its exhaust stacks chopped and modified after delivery, it was repainted with the classic arcade scheme with the new archway logo in 2017. From my understanding, the Nathan M5 that's on number 113 was sourced from 111, which was effectively retired by its adoption. 113 is still brought out as preferred power for small jobs, such as cleaning up track hiccups or doing ballast work, but freight moves are now handled mainly by the RS3M. Number 113 has ran only once for a freight run that I'm aware of since the RS3 arrived. Number 113 still takes the spotlight as the main passenger hauler for the regular diesel trains as well as the event runs. In the July of 2023, there was a photo charter put together by several local rail fans and rail enthusiasts, which actually managed to get on the cover of the 2023 October issue of Rail Pace magazine, which really did serve as a final curtain call for the age of the Centercabs hauling freight on the homegrown short line. Number 112 led north on a doubleheader, leading a passenger freight consist with a yellow C&W hopper tied into the mix, and along the route posed for several photo and video run-bys all the way to Reisdorf's and back into Arcade. The RS3 actually showed up the day before the event, and just like that, history was made. The railroad of Centercabs has something new to haul its freight, a relatively exciting 1953-built Elco RS3, which is actually older than 113 because 113 was built in 1959. The RS3 is certainly something different, but still notably vintage and unique. With the exception of a single specialty run, the Centercabs have now only been used for the passenger runs. The RS3 has taken over the freight responsibilities. And that will change once 18 returns to service, which, as I've posted about, the boiler has been returned, the running gear is back, meaning all there is to do with number 18 is put it back together. And steam will once again be steaming through Arcade, and the Centercabs will be left to obscurity. Of course, we still have the winter runs. The A&A doesn't use the steam engine in the winter, and with the Christmas trains being split into 3-car consists, the use for 2 diesels is a necessity. I didn't realize that I'd be catching the end of an era, a final slice of the Centercab pie on this historic small-town short line when I decided to start recording video just a few years ago. The Centercabs certainly aren't going anywhere, but they certainly won't be getting out of the shed quite as much anymore. They haven't made the trip to North Java ever since the RS3 arrived, so with the exception of the Maple runs, they're likely to be held between Arcade and Couriers. And if nothing else, we still have history, roughly 80 years of Centercabs and Arcade to pull from. I'm sure people have videos, photos, stashed somewhere that has a chance of making it onto the web for people to enjoy. Stuff gets posted almost every day. A couple days ago, as I'm making this script, Dynamo Productions put up a video featuring 1971 footage of number 14. So there's no telling what people have stashed around, and there's no telling what'll be posted and what other stuff we'll find. But in the meantime, this has been History in the Making. This is Captain Retro, and I hope you enjoy.